Alright, ladies and gents, now it is time for the meat and potatoes of this counter-argument. I laid my foundation in the introduction. You've got two criticisms. One is that Fullmetal Alchemist Sacred Star of Milos is not related to Hiromu Arakawa's world. It's a worthless side story. And the other criticism is that the characters that we know and love from the Fullmetal Alchemist canon are given the shaft. They don't get their screen time. They don't get due justice done to who they are. And we just don't have enough time in the world to spend with them to really invest our emotions. The result of these two criticisms is most commonly articulated as a mediocre film that is emotionally void. And I'm here to tell you that that's wrong. And I'm not just going to sit here and tell you that it's wrong. I'm going to blow your mind with how wrong it is by showing you all of the cool things hidden inside of this film. The quickest way I'm going to be able to do that was laid out in part 1. So you're going to have to keep these two things in mind. I'm going to answer the first criticism about the unrelated nature of the story through the symbol of the book. The self-referential plot point where within Sacred Star of Milos, Professor Crichton carries the secret of Don't Forget 311 in his alchemical journal. And that throughout the course of the film, whether it be in the opening scene where tragedy befalls Ashley and Julia, whether it be in the middle arc where Ed and Al explore Table City, or whether it be in the film's climax when Julia and Ashley defeat Atlas and reconcile their familial differences, all of this can be subsumed under the identity of Fullmetal Alchemist, from its themes to its characters to its visuals and its symbolism. And to the second criticism, I answer that far from being devoid of the characters that you know and love, Sacred Star of Milos is actually a stage of Shakespearean magnitude where the setting and the environments themselves become literal representations of the characters that then allow those characters, after the proper symbolism has been developed, to step into their own story, so to speak, and repeat the most important beats of that character drama. Alright? So, a book. And the stage within the book, or the contents of the book, are the two things you're going to have to keep in mind as I rocket through all of the themes, visuals, and symbols in this movie. Before we start, I need to do a little world building so that we're on the same page. I mentioned in the previous video that the valley is at times drawn in the shape of Ed's automail arm and leg. This can be specifically seen in the scene where Miranda recounts the history of Milos in the Black Bat's hideout beneath the city. There's a shot that shows the valley being excavated, and there's literally chiseled into the rock wall a right hand that is rigor mortis. And then on the left side of the screen, there's a chunk taken out of the wall and then a rock crusher in the shape of a foot with a pointed toe, a left foot. There's your specific evidence for that. The city, I don't really think I need to give you a specific scene, because if you just watch the movie, it clearly looks like Alphonse's layered shoulders and collar armor and his helmet. In fact, they even redrew Alphonse a little bit and made his head skinnier and the shoulders broader to make the similarity more pronounced. So if you can't see that, there's nothing I can do to help you. The one thing I didn't touch about that I need to flesh out for your understanding is the foundation, the cornerstone of Milos, which is actually the sacred Plateau. If you go to the scene right after they burn the dead bodies and the small child comes to Old Man Gon and gives him the bracelet to take to Julia, Ed and Al come up out of the valley and they overlook this large cliff. And there's a panning shot from the sky down to the depths of the valley. If you pay attention in that scene, what you're going to notice is that the sacred plateau is a giant rock bell. The city and the tower are where you grasp the ringer. The bell is face downward like a bell hanging in a steeple. The plateau are the sides, and then they flare out at the base where the trash is and are encircled by water that is reflective. There are other shots that demonstrate that, most noticeably when Al saves Julia and they almost fall to their deaths. Because it's illustrating that she is the prototype of Winry Rockbell. She's introduced, she's wearing a skirt and the jacket just like Winry, long hair just like Winry. She goes flying through the air and lands on a bell tower, and then Al saves her and they fall off the edge. Camera pans down and shows that the entire city is a rock bell. Now what that's doing is it's basically showing you that it's Julia's city. Her heart and her story is going to be told there, and it's aligning the background or the setting with the foreground of the characters. That happens many times throughout the story. But for our purposes here, I just need to establish that Table City is a giant rock bell. The city itself on top of the plateau is Alphonse's armor, and the excavated valley that has been decomposed and used to reconstruct the hiding place for the hidden transmutation blood seal circles is Ed. Just like how in the story his body's broken down, he gives up his left leg and his right arm as the toll, etc. And what you have in that central plateau is the threesome, the chain of three that is not easily broken of Ed, Alan, Winry, the heart of the book of Fullmetal Alchemist. And it is crowned by a city which has for its highest peak a tower with 3 prongs and 2 flared out sides, right? 311. This is all the evidence you need to connect the ending of the movie and the beginning of the movie that I discussed in the first video with the central component, the heart of Fullmetal Alchemist and the city of the movie. Now, surrounding the city is a river. This river, particularly in the scene where Pedro gets killed by the wolf chimera, is very clearly shown to be in the shape of the Ouroboros tattoo that the homunculi have, the snake that devours its own tail. Right? So just like the book at the beginning has the Ouroboros wrapped around it, the city has the encircling river wrapped around it. And this is to pay homage to the source of the Ouroboros in history. The historical source of the Ouroboros is Egyptian in the Egyptian mysteries. And it has to do with Hermes and the Hermetic writings of the Egyptians passed on to the Greeks. It's related to something called the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Or, as you're more familiar in Fullmetal Alchemist, all is one, one is all. The reason why it's portrayed as a river is because as above, so below, and all is one, one is all being identical, what you'll notice is that the way that the shots and the tracking is done on Milos, when it looks down into the river encircling the city, it's actually looking up into the sky because of the reflection. So you get this really trippy thing where the city and the city are meeting together like, what? A mouth, right? Eating a meal at the Table City. The snake that devours its own tail. And so you have this encircling the city, all right? Now, outside of that, you have Kraid on one side and Amestris on the other side, and you have the sacred mountain, okay, that the Milosians consider to be most holy. Now, what that is your classic volcano and volcanism representing the power and of the human soul and the spirit. In this case, the spirit of Fullmetal Alchemist. The seal, or the gateway to the spirit, is represented by a geothermal plant whose top portion during its introduction is drawn as a hand reaching up, and its bottom extends down with a rock crusher on the bottom as a foot. That's the left foot and the right arm of Ed, or, you know, equivalent exchange, basically, opening up the gate. The reason why the gate is volcanic and described as volcanism is a symbol that you're going to have to, that you're only going to understand if you're paying attention when Table City is first introduced. And this occurs when Riza Hawkeye unravels her scrolls and her maps, her atlases, on Mustang's desk at the beginning. The map of Amestris, which is unraveled first, if you'll notice towards the western desert where Ishbal and the Xerxes rooms are located, the map has been slightly tampered with to resemble a nose and a mouth. And when she unravels the Milosian map, it conveniently adds in teeth to this mouth, and then unfurls in the shape of a tongue and a throat, spiraling into the circle at the center of the city, the Ouroboros. So in effect, you have Amestris consuming Table City, right? Table City being the Philosopher's Stone, or where the Philosopher's Stone is forged in this case, and swallows it down. Thus, from the beginning, you have objective where the director of the film is clearly trying to communicate to you that lying underneath the apparent differences of Table City is the beating heart, blood, and spirit of Fullmetal Alchemist. This is the spirit that is Milos, and this is the spirit whose banner is the Phoenix in the film. Thus, you have a clear connection from the very beginning, thematically, through volcanism and the shape of Table City with the surrounding Ouroboros and the arm and the leg of the geothermal plant, all cleverly concealed symbols in what? An alchemist manuscript, a hidden cipher for Fullmetal Alchemist. A link to the end when the volcano erupts and all becomes one and one becomes all. The pages of the book are woven together, the valley is connected, and the Milosian people are saved. In the process, reenacting all that is best about Fullmetal Alchemist while destroying all that is worst. Another very important point to be made to the self-referential nature of this film. Because who is the villain in Fullmetal Alchemist Sacred Star of Milos? It is the brother, or more specifically, the false brother, because it's actually Lieutenant Atlas who ripped off the face of the true brother and is wearing it, right? In light of everything else that we discussed, this seems like a very clear nod to Fullmetal Alchemist 1 and Fullmetal Alchemist manga, represented respectively by the spirit, or the Firebird, because FMA 1 was not the original work, right? But it was so good that a lot of fans said that it preserved the spirit of the work. So it is the spirit of the work, and the Ouroboros, or the actual book, right, that is sealed by the geothermal plant and contains all the fire and the power. This is Arakawa's manga, okay? So what is the third thing? What is the city? What is the evil city where all of the tragedy occurs, right? Well, the plot makes it clear that the city is built in the shape of the mountain, all right? Just like Atlas is built in or steals the likeness of Ashley, okay? There's very strong parallels going on here. And this seems to me to suggest the Brotherhood FMA debate, because a lot of people that I know, a lot of FMA fans that I know don't like Brotherhood. They think it's terrible, and I am in agreement. I think it's shallow, it's weak, the pacing is bad, the animation is inconsistent, and the tone is ruined. It's horrific. They ripped out the heart of the origin story of the Elrics and replaced it with a bunch of antics. And that, to me, at least, is just not what the FMA world is. And apparently, director Murata agrees, because, and whoever wrote this thing, I don't remember the screenwriter's name off the top of my head, apparently they agree, because one of the biggest symbols in the film is the false brother, or the evil city in the likeness of the true city. You can almost go into Augustinian city of God, city of man, good and evil stuff here. That is the imposter, the shapeshifter, or the mimicker, right? That tries to rip off the original. That point, in conjunction with everything else we discussed, seems to me to make a pretty convincing argument for the fact that this is a self-referential work, that the book and the table motif, studying on a table, reading through the book, and the consumption motif, the snake that devours its own tail, being like the tragedy of Fullmetal Alchemist, represented by, don't forget, 311, all kind of bind together to tell a cohesive narrative that is not only aware of itself, but also aware of fan expectations and intelligent enough to make jokes and make a cool plot out of what traditionally would just be some kind of a flame war. I'm gonna leave it at that for now. I didn't even get to go into a lot of the other depth, but I think that's a pretty good world building video to give you an idea of my argument, or my counter argument, against why this is a disconnected film. There's one more point I want to touch on when I come back, and that is the Black Bat's hidden chamber within the book inside of the city, because that's where you get into the secret of the Sacred Star, which is represented as 7 lights beneath the ground, ruled by a central tower or an 8th tower. And that's where we're going to get into the homunculi and the actual 7 sins and their role in this movie. Once I'm able to get through that, I think I will have pretty much completely refuted the criticism that this film does not feature the homunculi and is not connected to the rest of the Fullmetal Alchemist world. So on that note, I'll leave, and I'll be back with part 3 later.